Dmitry Alexandrovich Prigov, and whenever I say his name, it brings a smile to my face. He used the patronymic always in addressing others, including his friends. That's why I am intentionally using it as well. Prigov created a postmodernist total artwork, what the Germans called Gesamtkunstwerk. I became fully aware of this past summer when I went to his retrospective exhibit in Moscow at the new Tretyakov Art Gallery. Prigov, in other words, was not only a poet and later a prose writer, but also a sculptor. In fact, he earned money initially by sculpting animals for children's playgrounds. And as he told me once, he really enjoyed doing that. He was a graphic artist, an installation artist, a performance artist, even using his voice. In other words, he was even a singer, using his voice in performing some of his poetry. The exhibit that I attended was the very best presented exhibition in Russia that I had ever seen. And in my mind's eye, no, not in my mind's eye, but in my mind's voice, I said, "Hurrah for Prigov," and even mentally clapped. An example from that exhibit. In one of the very dark rooms, on one wall was projected Prigov performing his oral texts, what he called orальные тексты, which in Russian means both oral or suggests oral, but also shouting, from the verb орать, to shout. So he was shouting on one wall. On the other side of the room was an installation with one of his cleaning women. He had constructed several installations in the past with the image of the cleaning woman. And on that wall was a surveilling eye, a large painted surveilling eye. So that's one example. And the surveilling eye, or a big eye, was one of his leitmotifs, that is, in his visual work. I first met Dmitry Alexandrovich in Moscow in 1988. The next year, when he first came to the United States, he stayed with us. And in the morning, to breakfast, he would bring a stack of poems that he had written during the night. He, in general, worked during the night. And I naively asked him to show us or to read one of the poems that he really liked. And he responded with the following, that he's working on a large conceptualist project to write some humongous number of poems. I don't remember the number, but it was huge. And that in this project, quantity was what was at stake, not quality. When he was visiting, I took him to see the architectural sites of LA, the postmodernist buildings downtown, especially the Bonaventure Hotel, with its multiple reflecting surfaces. There are 5 towers, 5 round towers, in which one can see refractions, fragments, distortions of the surrounding world. Then we went up the elevator, the glass elevator, from which one got a completely different angle, or maybe not completely, but a different perspective on that same world. We also went inside the building, which was radically different from the outside. It was claustrophobic, labyrinthine, and one really very easily got lost in that hotel. Needless to say, Prigov was fascinated by the whole thing. The last time I saw Prigov in Moscow was at a performance piece of the Prigov family group, him, his son, and daughter-in-law. And they performed this action piece called Karmlenie, or feeding, with each one of them putting a big bunch of spaghetti into the mouth of another that would then rhythmically flow out and fall into the hand of that person, and he or she would then repeat the same action, and this with another one, and this went around the circle many times, and it went off without a hitch and immaculately. What this action piece represented was eating and defecation. That same summer in Moscow, it was 2000, I was celebrating my 60th birthday, and he came to the party, which of course delighted me. The last time I saw Prigov was in Berkeley, in fact, in connection with the performance that you are watching, that you have been watching, which I organized. He stayed with me again. Again in the morning, he would bring me, this time, a stack of graphic work to show me. We, of course, talked, had many very interesting conversations, but the most memorable one was the story of polio. He had polio, I think, at the age of 12, which confined him to bed for almost a year. And he really struggled, as he told me, working very hard, very consistently, to overcome the effects of polio. That helped me understand, at least in part, the phenomenal productivity of Prigov, because he was, well, humongous numbers of poems, etc. He was truly very productive. I missed Dmitry Alexandrovich. Not only his artistry and sophisticated intellect, but also, despite his conceptualist ways, a kind of genuineness, sometimes almost childlike, his generosity, the absence of any visible signs of self-importance. Dmitry Alexandrovich was a truly fine human being.